Now in the UK, Mother's Day is around 2 weeks away now, so I thought this was the perfect opportunity to pipe some buttercream flowers. So in this week's video tutorial, I'm going to be showing you how to pipe these really pretty cupcakes that look like individual bouquets of flowers. Now you could also use these flowers and add them onto your cakes, but I'm going to be showing you how to pipe pretty roses, peonies and these hydrangeas. I really hope you enjoyed this video tutorial. If you do, don't forget to hit the like button, and if you'd like to see more videos like this and you haven't already, don't forget you can subscribe to the channel. Okay, let's get started. So the things that I'm going to need is, first of all, I've got some vanilla cupcakes. Now I will put a link in the description below to the recipe if you want to make these cupcakes. I've then got a selection of piping nozzles that I'm going to use to create the different flowers. I've then got my flower nail, and I've just applied a small amount of double-sided tape to the top. To this I'm going to add on some squares of parchment paper, so I've just cut these out of a larger sheet. I've got some different colour food gels that I'm going to use to colour my buttercream and my piping bags. I've also got a batch of my American buttercream, and I will also put a link to the recipe for this in the description below. For each of my flowers, I'm going to be colouring my buttercream in a slightly different colour. So I'm going to start by taking a small amount of that buttercream, and this is going to be for my roses. Now, as you can see, the buttercream has been sitting, so we've got these air bubbles that have appeared. Start by adding just a small amount of colour, and this one is just using the Wilton Peach. And as I mix that round, push that buttercream onto the side of my bowl. This is going to get rid of any air bubbles that have built up in our buttercream. So this is going to give me a nice smooth buttercream. Now, the first flower that we're going to create is a classic rose. So for this, I'm going to be using a 104 piping tip, and this one has a teardrop shape at the end. The opening on this one is around 1 centimetre, and this is going to create a rose which is about 1 inch in diameter. Start by trimming the bottom off of my piping bag, placing a nozzle inside and pulling that tight. Now, you've probably seen me do this before, but I usually use a glass just to hold my piping bag still. Now, when piping flowers, they can take a little while. So if you've got a lot of buttercream in your piping bag at a time, your hands can end up heating up that buttercream so it becomes very soft. So one tip would be add a small amount of buttercream at a time, and you can always add to this. I'm gonna start with my flower needle, and this is a number 7. So the top is around 1.5 inches. Now, I've added some double-sided tape onto the top of this, or you could just add a small amount of buttercream and stick that on top. To pipe my rose, I've got my piping tip with the wider section at the bottom leading up to a point. And at all times, you want to keep the piping bag fairly still, and we're just going to be rotating that flower needle. Now apply a small amount of pressure and let some of that buttercream come out. Move the flower needle clockwise around, tilt the piping bag forward slightly so that it's wider at the bottom, coming into a point at the top. I then want to create 3 separate petals, and I'm going to start so that the first one is going to cover that open edge. These ones, I'm also slightly tilting the piping tip inwards. For the next one, I'm going to come halfway back and just do that over the top of the previous one, and the same for the third one. Now for my next row, I'm going to do 5 petals, so I'm going to do them in exactly the same way, but I'm also going to start by just tilting my piping bag back slightly. And that's going to give us this really pretty little rose. I can then carefully take off my parchment paper, and these can be popped in the fridge to firm up. Now, each of my cupcakes is going to have 1 rose on it, together with the peonies and the hydrangeas. So you want to pipe as many roses to as many cupcakes as you have. For the next flower, I'm going to make a small peony. For this, I've got the number 123 piping tip, and this is actually a larger piping tip. This does actually come in smaller sizes. So if you wanted the medium one, it's the 122, and there's a slightly smaller 121, which is just going to give you different sizes for your peonies. Now, like the rose petal tip, this also has a teardrop shape, but this one is curved to one side. For my peony, I've added some light pink buttercream into my piping bag with my piping nozzle. Now again, starting with a piece of parchment paper, I'm going to create a small ball of buttercream in the center. Now with the point of my piping tip pointing into the center, I'm going to tilt my piping bag. First of all, I'm going to put 3 petals across the top, and I want these to intersect in the center, just leaving a slight gap. So that's the start of our peony. So now I'm going to do 4 petals around the edge. I'm just going to tilt my piping bag back slightly. And there we have our small peony. And I'm going to pop those in the fridge just to firm up slightly along with my roses. For my third flower, I'm going to create some hydrangeas. So for this, I'm going to be using 2 piping tips. Now, first of all, I've got the 103. So this is one of the smaller rose petal tips, one size down from the one that we used for our roses. This one has an opening of around 7mm. I'm also going to be using the number 2 piping tip. So this one just has a really small circle opening at the end, and this one's going to be used to create the center of our hydrangeas. So I've got this darker pinky purple for my petals and a lighter pink for the center of my flowers. Now, first of all, I'm going to start with a single hydrangea flower, and I'm going to move on to a little cluster of hydrangeas. Lay my piping bag quite flat and just pipe square, again keeping the wider part of my piping tip at the bottom. I want to create 4 petals. Now, hydrangea petals are quite square. Lean my piping bag back slightly. I want to make sure that the bottom of my piping nozzle is connecting with that buttercream square that we've already made. Stop applying pressure and pull away. Now, I want all of my petals to look like they're coming from the center. So starting in the middle of our previous petal, we're going to go in the opposite direction. I'm going to do exactly the same for the third side. And for the fourth one, I'm going to add my piping bag into that gap, pipe my 4th petal, and just pull up. I can then take my number 2 piping tip, and in the center, I'm going to pipe 4 tiny dots, and together they're going to look a little bit like a square. For each of your cupcakes, you're going to need a few single ones and a cluster. In order to create a little cluster, I'm first of all going to create a dome on the top, around 1 inch across. I'm then going to do exactly the same as I did for the single one, but all over the little dome. So there we've got our first little hydrangea on the top. I can then tilt the needle and do another one on the side. Then work my way around. If we've got any gaps, I'm just going to put some single petals in, just so it looks like there's some coming up from in between. I can then go in and on all the full ones, add in our little flower centers. So there we've got a little cluster of hydrangeas. So I'm going to start with one of my cupcakes, and I've coloured the remaining of my buttercream in this light green colour using the Colour Splash leaf green. Apply this over the top of my cake just to give those flowers something to stick onto. And I'm going to start with my hydrangeas. So I've got a very small little spatula, and I'm going to slide that underneath, peel off the parchment paper and just stick that down. I'm then going to take one of my peonies and just pop that onto the side. I've then got space, one of my roses just tucked in there. In these spaces on the side, I'm going to start by taking just some of those single hydrangeas and just popping that space. And I'm going to do the same on the other side. Now our flowers have been added, I'm going to finish off my cupcakes with some green leaves and a few tiny little flower buds. So first of all, for my leaves, I've got the number 352 piping tip, and this one just has a triangle cut out on the side, so we've got a V. I've then got, for my flower buds, a number 3 piping tip, and I'm going to use this alongside the rest of my buttercream that I've still got in my number 2 piping tip. Now, because I want both of these to be green, I'm actually going to use a coupler. So it means I can use the same piping bag, taking my piping bag, and just as you would with a piping tip, pull that to the end. And you want the end of the piping bag just going over some of those notches. Then take your first piping tip, so my first one is going to be the number 3, and pop that on the end. We've then got a screw cap. So there we've got our piping bag, and I'm going to fill this with my green buttercream. Now for the flower buds, you want to start by piping a small little ball. I can then take the light pink, push that piping tip inside that green ball slightly, and apply pressure until that green is surrounding the pink. And I'm going to put a few of those around the cake. I can then take my piping bag, undo that, take that piping tip out and switch it over to my leaf piping tip, making sure that that cutout is on the side, so the point is pointing up. I'm then going to fill in the rest of my gaps with some leaves. So you just want to apply pressure until that buttercream comes out. You can move it slightly to make a slightly textured leaf, and when you're happy with the size, just pull away. There we have a little flower bouquet cupcake. So you can make them in any colour you like just by changing your buttercream. I really hope you've enjoyed this video tutorial and will be able to use some of these buttercream flowers either on your cupcakes or on some of your larger cakes. As always, if you have enjoyed the video, please give it a like, and if you haven't already, don't forget you can subscribe to the Cakes Managed YouTube channel. Now, as always, I will be putting a list of all the tools and piping nozzles that I've used in today's video in the description below, so you can find them there. So until next time, bye!